Looks great.
All right, thank you. Um, like she said, my name is Tyson Seirer. I'm the conservation specialist here at Starseed. We are based out of Osborne, Kansas. That's north central Kansas. Um, and my role here is helping uh, design mixes, complete orders, facilitate our dealers, distributors, uh, acquisition on seed for our conservation programs, mostly involving native grasses, wildflowers, support for soil conservation programs. We also have our ag seeds. We are one of the larger, if not largest, certified seed wheat dealers here in the Midwest. We carry forages, alfalfa, small grains, and different things there, as well as cover crop blends to suit our agricultural needs for the area and distribution of those throughout a good part of the Midwest. But that's kind of what we're doing here, and been in business here at Starseed over 100 years. So goes back a long time. Today, what we've got, we're going to be talking again about cover crops and how to manage those fields for wildlife specifically. As we're all pretty most familiar with purposes of cover crops, you'll see listed here from erosion control measures, weed suppression, forages and things. Mostly that last bullet here, wildlife habitat, is what we're going to focus on and go over. So we'll get right into that. Cover crops can provide habitat for various different types of wildlife. Mostly what we see benefiting from these and dealing with, whether it's pollinating insects, bees and butterflies, to grassland nesting birds here in our uplands with turkeys, pheasants, and quail. We do see some prairie chicken throughout Kansas that utilize some of our cover crop fields, as well as big game animals, deer and such there. So you can, if you're looking to target specifically a certain species or habitat component, you can do different things to provide the proper structure or plants needed, or cover or food sources for those different options. A lot of what we see for our upland birds is trying to provide some kind of a nesting or brood cover. And we keep in mind, again, these are temporary covers that are typically annuals that are planted at different seasons throughout the cropping year and between different row crops when there's an open plan. So for nesting and brood cover, these plantings likely would be in the spring or summer, is when that type of habitat is going to be required to benefit those grassland birds. And here we're looking at trying to create some kind of a diverse mixture that includes grasses, whether it be cool or warm season, depending on the time of year that we're looking at putting in these cover crops, as well as legumes and broadleaves. Good mixture there. The spring planted or seeded behind wheat crop here is pretty common. I'd say a majority of our cover crops that get planted here are following our summer harvest of wheat, where they're either on their last year of wheat in their rotation to be followed by a spring planted crop the following season. So where these fields used to be just wheat fallow left over, we're seeing more chem fallow and or just tillage, where they're waiting to be planted to a spring crop and not going back to wheat that winter. So here we're trying to create that structure for that environment. It's the most important for that, either the nesting cover or brood cover for those summer mixes. This is a cover crop chart that I find helpful in helping develop or design some of the mixes as far as some of the options. And there's things on that are available that aren't listed here. This is kind of just a generic idea of some of the different species that are available and where they fall when someone who's trying to develop that mixture into designing that structure. And what I like to point out here, the most important part for creating upland bird habitat, whether if we're trying to focus on that nesting or brood cover, is that plant architecture, that box there in the middle at the top. We're trying to focus on finding crop species that are going to be an upright development, or that upright and spreading. It's that vertical cover that we're looking for, that prostrate, that creeping stuff that's grown along the ground, that might be better at some soil health or weed suppression by, covering the ground, and erosion controls aren't as sought after for the habitat component. It's more the upright cover that's going to allow us that type of structure that we're looking for when trying to benefit from nesting and brood cover out of these cover crops on our fields. I've got an example here of a few that we do. This one here is called Chick Magnet. This is a mix that we've kind of put together, that is just that, something that's typically planted after wheat, where we're trying to recreate some overhead upright canopy cover and something that's going to attract our bugs for those chicks to have to eat on while they're so little. The open space, the bare ground's important for them to travel. So we need some open space at the ground. And being in wheat stubble, we usually have, 7.5 inch, pretty clean rows on the ground level, harvested wheat. As soon as these can be planted and get some growth back on them following wheat, we'll have some great bug attracting cover. But here you'll see we're using turnip, some cowpeas, yellow blossom sweet clover there, a cool season pea, an Austrian winter pea, and a buckwheat and sunflower. So we've got a lot of broadleaf legumes and broadleaf there, both some cool and warm season, and we're expecting that cover to be planted, as quickly after wheat harvest as possible. Some guys might do an application of Roundup just to burn down any volunteer that might be becoming. But typically, once we can get this in, we can get some ground cover to help control some of that volunteer and create some good growth that's going to provide some optimal brooding habitat for upland birds. Another mix there, green fields is another common one that we get called for often in this area. This is more of a kind of a later brooding into winter cover, a little more so. It still has the turnip, and we got radishes, sweet clover, the cowpeas. There's also a mung bean here for another warm season legume, the sunflower again. But you'll see on this one, we're also adding some sorghum sudan and pearl millet. So it's getting some extra height, some more structure for going into, once we provide those bugging grounds, but also providing some structure for overwinter cover and some later food sources for birds that may, make this property or this field, a bigger part of their home range for later into the season, and also using it for winter cover, some thermal capabilities, as well as some winter food sources there with the sorghum sudan and millet seed as well. We can look and see what some of that looks like. Here's some examples of some similar plantings that include a lot of those. You'll see some millet, German millet there, sunflower, oats. It's kind of a combination there, but that's kind of the habitat that we're looking for creating some of that over summer brooding habitat. In kind of that space where you can see some bare ground, 40-50% bare ground inside there, but you've got that upright overhead canopy cover is kind of the target for that, and for cover. As far as your spring mixes for nesting habitat, again, those are going into fields that would have been a fall crop, corn, milo, beans, something that would be going back into a spring crop that following year. So, or a fall crop, sorry. So into that milo stubble after milo harvest, late fall, for a nesting cover. If someone's next rotational crop is going to be coming in and they're going to wheat, then they would have all spring and summer of that field milo stubble setting idle, and would be an ideal, great opportunity to put in a cover crop during that downtime, waiting for that wheat to be planted in September, October. So a nesting cover can be planted there. Um, that will have, um, some cool season grass cover in early, and some warm season legumes, so that we've got brooding cover all through that time frame. Here's a little video of kind of looking at what we're kind of talking about for um, that structure and canopy, bare ground, trying to create that diversity and that kind of structure for upland birds in this environment through our cover cropping system. But they've got to be able to get through in our wheat stubble acres, in our milo stubble with the wider planted rows, can provide us with that bare ground component, and we're getting our vertical structure created for predator avoidance and just cover there as well. But they're going to be attracting to the bugs that are feeding. Let's see. All right, there's another picture. Some of those summer planted cover crops got some hairy vetch in there, some barley, wheat, peas, sunflower. Um, so good diversity, good mixtures. Here over summer planting some buckwheat. On the other end, looking at winter covers, another target time frame we're trying to focus on for a lot of our folks that are doing cover crops. Here again, the difference being we're trying to focus on something that's going to provide that vertical structure and cover over the winter months, where we get harsher conditions, snow, hail, rain, something that's going to hold up and provide some cover on fields that would otherwise normally be fairly bare and uninhabitable by grassland birds, even deer. On these where you've got a wheat stubble or a bean field, where there's not much for cover, these can be very attractive to wildlife and as well as sportsmen for hunting activities, where you can create some huntable acres by attracting birds and game to these cover fields. Here we're including things like our millets, our pearl and proso millet, sorghum sudan grass, forage and grain sorghums as well. Also provide that food source going into winter in those areas that can be helpful. As far as for hunting opportunities, I've had a lot of experience with folks coming, liking the idea of using cover crops in their rotation, just because it's turned a lot of their acres that were unhuntable into something that they could attract game to and have access to for hunting. So for one example, an individual had like 900 acres of some farm ground, but all he had was CRP borders on a few fields, and his family would come to hunt often each year, but they said they'd only have enough out of all the land they owned and had to hunt. They usually could only put together a half day or less hunting trip because they didn't have much cover to walk, and game was limited when they were looking at edge species stuff for quail or borders. But being able to turn in all his acreage into a huntable area that had high likelihood of maintaining and holding birds through the fall, through the hunting season, and attracting them off the neighbors was pretty important to him. And he's gone to using a continuous cover system, where anytime after cash crops harvested, trying to look at providing some kind of cover back in there, especially if it's something that can provide a hunting opportunity to attract wildlife for his fall season. So we're creating those huntable acres out of what would have been a parking lot for majority of the season, while also providing some food source for game to come into to feed on. Here's some pearl millet in the background on this picture. This was, I believe, just a millet field planted into wheat stubble that was stripper cut. So we had lots of ground residue. They followed it up with pearl millet, just left residue over winter to help capture snow and moisture. And there was the way that the millet would break over and lodge. There was easy travel lanes, corridors through this field for birds, but very difficult to walk and get through, but held all kinds of wildlife from deer to pheasants and quail. Was just a great hotspot, nicely located in amongst areas that had some CRP fields around it that had been lost during some of the sign up and general signups. So there's definitely a place for birds looking for home, and this was able to create that kind of hidden habitat form that they were missing. Our cover crops can also offer some supplemental forages. We're seeing more folks use them for grazing livestock. So we'll get an opportunity to kind of dual purpose, provide some wildlife benefit to those that are also using them mainly for a grazing forage. But what we're also by being able to help manage that livestock herd among the field by paddock grazing and just extending portions of the field to the livestock at one time allows to kind of save the remainder of the field for wildlife use. And we will see pretty good activity from grassland birds throughout the summer and fall using the areas where the cattle have not been yet let access to. If they're back grazing to a water source for hauling in water, but they can coexist there as long as you're kind of saving something for them. If they just turn them all out on it, they'll be there a little bit on edges and stuff, but they can really utilize both of them if they're using a paddock grazing system. Some of the challenges that we see, weather is definitely a main concern for some folks on our drought years that we've been experiencing here in the Midwest. Do they have enough moisture after, a wheat crop? It kind of depends on what we're looking like for rainfall through the rest of the summer. As far as, or we want to try putting something in that's going to use some soil moisture out of the profile. It can also preserve, if we got moisture enough to grow them, it can also protect some of that soil, shade it off, and use some conservation measures there. And also that's when and how to terminate. If we've got enough growth on our cover crop that we can terminate it to avoid any more soil moisture loss, and we can just conserve what we have. So there's some things we're learning about when and how to do that there. Challenges we get from folks on drill calibration, trying to set a drill for, a high diversity mix where you've got different seed size. We've put some videos together and some how-tos to help people kind of figure out how to calibrate and set drills for that. I do get a lot of questions on, design on how many pounds per acre is ideal and what they cost. I put some figures in here. Pretty typical average mixes run 20 to 30 pounds an acre. That's going to put us somewhere with the seeds that we're using under a million seeds an acre. And I'd probably say that's a pretty good place to be. You get much more than that. And you're going to moving into more of that soil conservation, ground cover, but being able to capture that bare ground and have that vertical structure, 20 to 30 pounds usually can get the job done and keep us at a good cost in that $26 to $38 an acre, where folks kind of like to try to be. A few more things here. Just working with our landowners, producers, questions that come up, just trying to meet their objectives. If it's really just, putting in for wildlife or hunting opportunities, how we can manage those, and a time of year for when they're trying to put in covers to fit the rotation. If it's something, spring nesting cover, if it's going to be summer brood mixed time, or if it's just a fall planting going in after corn or beans, just to put some cover down. Not as beneficial, a little late in the season for us, but they can provide some good spring refuges there when things might start being thin. And then how they plan to manage that, whether they're leaving it and just going to no-till new crop through them, if they're grazing those, how to best manage that to benefit wildlife. And some of those getting hay and baled, the timing of which we try to work with on, and or portioning that as well. that's all I've got for slides here, and I think we've got time here for questions now, so we can see what you have there. I see some stuff in chat we'll have to look at and see what we can help with there.
Yeah, so I think thank you, Tyson. And I think we'll follow up with your contact information if anyone wants to, reach out to you with specific questions. But there was a question from Nick regarding the planting date of your winter cover crop mix. If you have data on that, like how, I know you're in Kansas, it's a little bit different climate than here in Illinois, but can you share a little bit of information on planting dates and lead times for those winter covers?
Yeah, certainly. We'll pull up some stuff here for that. So our fall seeded winter covers. We'll see stuff that's planted in August, September, going into our fall cool season mixes. If they're coming in after beans or corn, we've got some mixes that are designed to be aerial seeded, either via drone or plane, and they're flying those on pre-harvest. So they're kind of designed around a lot of clover and different things there for cover that can be intercrop growing head start before they would harvest their beans or their corn mostly is where we're flying those into, or sorghum and stuff. But yeah, a lot of our green shift and green wing mixes, a lot of oats and peas, winter trit, those are being planted here in August and September.
Okay, and then are they generally, I guess some of the species might be winter kill or they survive the winter? Can you talk a little bit about kind of the termination management on the
Yeah,
other end?
most in our climates here, most of the stuff that we're using is going to winter kill. For us, there may be a few that may come back around up yet in the spring, our winter triticale and winter barley. We'll see some of those, or if they're mixing in some spring barley, spring trit, we'll see some growth there in the spring. But winter kill terminates most of our covers down here in Kansas. And others are doing some techniques as far as just a chemical application if they're just Roundup. Early growing season come spring to terminate. Others, if we've got sun hemp, different covers, I've seen guys that are rolling, crimping, ryegrass and different such to break that for termination process there as well.
Okay. And then I think you touched on this a little bit. I know a lot of your examples were after wheat, and you get that really nice summertime for good growth for the forage and shelter for the wildlife. And then, just maybe talk a little bit about any adjustments that you think would be needed in more of a corn and soybean rotation setting like Illinois, if you have any insights into that.
Yeah, if you've got a much narrower window as far as for trying to, there wouldn't be much opportunity for a brood cover if once corn's planted. I mean, we're going to have growing crop during that window, so we're not able to accomplish much for a brood cover planting there on a corn bean rotation or continuous corn and such. But having something in after corn harvest, something that could go over winter, um, you're going to see some usage, probably more so just loafing and using cover. As far as nesting, it's going to be not ideal nesting cover, probably able to grow early enough in the year that they're going to be able to fledge out of before corn comes through. So in that manner, that's too short of a window to probably get a lot there. But so not as beneficial for creating a nesting brooding on something where it's intensively corn and bean. But we'll have stuff guys will put in just for, I mean, more focused on soil health. But if some growing covers, if they were able to fly on or do aerial application, you could probably get in some covers that could be used some of those acres for over winter fall. But the key part for upland birds, I think, is being able to provide that nesting brooding opportunity is where to really help that population is where it's at.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and actually, before I ask what I think might be kind of a controversial question, I just do encourage folks, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll read them off. But you're also welcome to raise your hand or just come off camera, and I'll take that as a signal you're interested in asking a question. But just while you're prepping your questions for from the audience, I'll ask you, Tyson, because one of the things that I've heard from people is that, you know, we're really promoting cover crops for soil health and erosion control and water quality. And then some folks are saying that it's actually like some of those overwintering cover crops become a death trap for pheasants and quail and things like that, because they're using it for winter shelter, of course, which is beneficial to them. But then if they do establish nests there in the early March, April season, and then the fields are terminated and planted into the corn or soybeans, they're actually ruining the population.
Mhm.
So I'm just kind of curious to hear from you, what your take on that is in terms of the trade-offs, and is that what should we be thinking about and communicating as we talk with growers interested in cover crops for wildlife benefits?
Yeah, I could see, depends on what their objective is with that cover crop they're planting that's going to overwinter. If it's something, ideally, if we're creating the structure, um, that's that upright vertical structure, that's winter cover, not all the time is it ideal nesting cover. So maybe hen selection for nest site, maybe they're moving out of some of that area to develop their nest if they've got grassland edges or places around. I think they'll, and I've not had that experience with those with here. We're not seeing a whole lot of that, but I would like to think maybe hen selection for nest site. Eventually, they're going to start avoiding some of those fields. But I mean, if it's providing the suitable cover that's ideal for nesting, I wouldn't. I mean, it would sure look like a good spot for them, and then obviously would be detrimental. I mean, they're going to lose those nests. But the good news is that usually when they're planning and going to lose that nest is early enough in the season that's going to allow plenty of time for a net for a hen to create a second nest, and she's going to move out of that area on a second attempt, and probably find something more suitable that's going to be less likely to be disturbed. So not yeah, it's a lot. It'd be a loss for her first attempt, but there's probably half the successful nests that are fledged are second round attempts already. So that's not too uncommon for them to overcome. So not devastating, but unfortunate for some of those. But trying to
Sure.
create that cover that's maybe not going to, offer that nesting um, cover, but something you know that would provide some vertical winter cover for them to habitat, and then moving out to find a suitable nesting site.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or another good
That's
reason to plant,
yeah.
some grassland edges or borders where they can, pick that over those acres. So if you can provide some safe acres or places that hopefully they're choosing for their nest site would be even better conservation practice.
Yeah, you read my mind. That's exactly what I was going to say. It was like that's where I think the value. I'm first of all, it's really encouraging to hear that by and large the birds will be able to do a second brood and be successful doing that through the season if their first nest is destroyed. And then yeah, for farms that have both those infield practices like cover crops and a edge of field, a buffer or something like that, that then provides that longer term shelter and brooding site for the wildlife. That's encouraging, and I think that's what we're trying to encourage as well. Like, this is a cover crop call, but we recognize the whole system, and this is a great example where kind of that system is beneficial, amplifies, and really synergistic, I guess is the word I'm looking for, that you get more benefit with both practices in connection with each other. um, Oh, yeah. Doug just posted a question. Are there any upright cover crop plants that can be planted in early to mid-September that provide winter shelter for the wildlife?
Yeah, certainly. Um, so yeah, mid-September, we're looking, you can probably get yet still. You might not make to grain on a few things, some short maturity sorghum, um, or even some millet would provide some vertical structure. So I would look for some of the millet or sorghum um, options for sorghum sedan or forage sorghums that could be planted there late that have, depends on when their frost sets in. If you can get, 60 days I know our triticale and even some barley, oats would be some cover, but um, yeah, if you could, that's probably going to be about the highest, tallest structure that you're going to find that you could get out of that. Sunflower, maybe some sunflowers later yet still could get some cover structure, but um, to do a lot of those are going to be our summer planting. Something that's in June or July would be more ideal. But going in mid-September, that's kind of what we're looking on, some shorter maturity millets and sorghums.
Great. And there was a question from Olivia regarding drought. Are there any species that you, maybe your go-to species when you are thinking that it could be a drought year? Like this year is quite dry in the Midwest.
Yeah. Back at that chart for the cover crop chart, there is another category in there that talks about a relative water use and gives you an idea on water consumption. And any of those that are, high water consuming plants, maybe avoid. But as far as go to, are oats and peas are pretty good for getting through drought. Both of those, our peas specifically don't have to have a lot of water. Your clovers are okay there as well, but I'm just kind of taking a look here too. Millet does well on a shorter water supply year. Um, so that might be some things to look at as well. Um,
Those are great suggestions. And I think we can include that chart, again, a link to that chart or a copy of
yeah.
that chart in the follow-up notes for this call, because that chart is really helpful and has a lot of information on there. I think last call for questions from the audience, and I have one more for you, Tyson. I'm just thinking about this from the hunter's perspective. When I was growing up, I actually loved the name of your mixed chick magnet. I thought that was very clever. When I was growing up, I want to say like people were planting some sort of peas and vetch and oats mix, and they would call it tripper because as you were walking through it, your legs and boots would get all caught on there. So I was just kind of curious if you had any we're looking at wildlife, but what about from the people who are really interested in hunting? Are there any preferences or considerations there?
From experience, we've had some years with turnips and radishes after freeze, years where they've grown really well. And, trying to break through that hard pan, you'll see a lot of those grow up out of the ground. And we were having, good sized turnips that almost looked like a little football that were growing up out of the ground and uprooting and shooting up. And we had turnips and radishes like that, or the radishes mostly, in those cover mixes where you're walking through, and after it's been freezing temps for months, when you're walking through those fields and hit them with your feet, your boots, and they don't break, it's like walking into a cinder block. So there's some challenges with walking through that, but nothing that we couldn't overcome. But yeah, there's some stuff that, I mean, if you difficult to walk through, that means it's providing the cover that it's difficult for predators to access as well. So it's a safe place. Slows down anybody who's pursuing them. And typically, once you get down on the ground and look through them, I've noticed how easily they can get through it at that ground level component, whereas we're trying to walk through the over top. But the way it lodges and breaks and grows, it's just ideal for birds to escape and move quickly through, but really bogs down your predators and aerial predators and such, gives them a place to forage without being preyed on.
Yeah, great. And yeah, dogs too. I've heard, dogs,
Yeah.
if you have your bird dogs, they'll get real tired running through
Yep.
some thick stuff. So, yeah, this is great. Well, this is interesting. And I think, we of course are very interested in seeing more cover crops on the ground, again, for soil health, water quality perspective in Illinois, but recognizing that landowners have multiple objectives. And this is certainly one of them that a lot of landowners enjoy and farmers enjoy hunting and being outside and seeing wildlife. So I really appreciate the information you shared this morning with us. And like I said, we'll follow up with some resources. And I think if there's no more questions for Tyson, last call for a question for him, but we will shift and use the next 10 minutes or so for any other updates and information on future calls. So thank you again, Tyson here. I think this is typically the time where we share information on the next call, but it's approaching harvest time here, and so we are not hosting a call in October, but we will be back in November. And I think, is there a slide we can maybe bump forward here? I think there's a poll or CEUs coming up in our future. I'm not quite sure where we are. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Resources. Yes, ISAP. These calls are hosted by folks at American Farmland Trust, but also on behalf of the Illinois Sustainable Ag Partnership. And ISAP has released 2 new resources. The first one to highlight that's on your screen is actually a cover crop dealer directory, which is just released by ISAP at the end of August. And if you use the QR code, you can you can access that directory. We'll also put a link in the chat where you can see that. And the directory is a PDF table of seed dealers and service providers in the state of Illinois, all focused on cover crops. We also have the option for you to access kind of like a Google Sheet, an Excel sheet, that if you're really savvy with technology and Excel and Google Sheets, you can filter and sort and search. It's just a little bit more dynamic than that PDF version. And what we really, really want also is for anybody out there who is selling cover crop seeds to fill out a quick form and add your information, because we know that this is not all a comprehensive list of the people providing cover crop seed and services in Illinois. So even if you're just doing custom planting and you're not a seed seller or seed dealer, you can be added to this directory in the hopes that we're really connecting farmers interested in adopting cover crops with people who can assist them. So check that out. And then I think we also have the other resource coming, or recently released by ISAP, is an overview of voluntary carbon markets. And this really just is an iteration or an update of some work we did a couple years ago, summarizing all the different carbon related incentives available to Illinois farmers. This document highlights 15 different programs and has really nice, succinct information about them, with the goal of creating some apples to apples comparison for farmers interested in considering these. And the link in the chat is there as well. You can access that as a PDF download from our website. And then I think there are, oh yeah, just any other updates from you all. If anybody has some field days, we're kind of wrapping up the field day season, but if anyone has field days or events, workshops coming up, feel free to share that information in the chat. And of course, you're also welcome to come on to camera and off mute and share the information directly with your peers. I'll pause for a moment just to see if anybody has anything to share. And yeah, if not, we have a couple things I can tick off here. We have the Upper Mississippi. Oh, Helen.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in with that. The Upper Mississippi River Basin Network is hosting a workshop this afternoon, 1 to 3 Central, on federal funding for conservation practices with multiple benefits. I actually presented at their first workshop in this series on ISAP's work and programs, and yeah, they put on a good show. So suggest that everyone attends that virtually if you're able this afternoon. And I'll drop a link in the chat.
Thanks, Helen. And I see that Ogle County SWCD is having a field day on September 28th. So contact the office. Thank you, Dennis and Molly, for posting that. I'll guess that you're working together on that event, which is fun to see. Partnerships and networks coming out of these calls. We also have a farmer-led learning center discussion is happening tomorrow in Cincinnati Mound, and this is really kind of the next step of trying to realize Dave Brandt's vision of some sort of farmer-centric place to experiment with cover crops and learn from each other. Oh goodness, let's see, lots of things coming. Andrea posted a PCM field day in Belleville on September 19th. Free lunch and provided. So it's a free workshop and free lunch. That sounds good. If you have like a RSVP or a registration link, Andrea, you can add that to the chat. There it is. Thank you, Andrea. I think folks who joined this call, you know, interested in wildlife, our topic today, there's actually a wetland field day for hunters at Feather Prairie Farm, which is also tomorrow. And I think we have a link for that. We'll put in the chat. That's hosted by ICEP member, the Wetlands Initiative. And then there's also, goodness, maybe a Conservation Matters discussion happening on the 28th. And it's really looking at investing in people to improve watersheds. A lot of this is interesting. You know, a lot of social science behind this in terms of why people adopt or don't adopt these practices. So lots going on. We will do our best to capture these and include them in the follow-up notes that will be sent out next week. I think we usually try to get these wrapped up within a few days and get them posted back out to the group via the Google group. There's no other network, no other updates from the network. We can flash up this QR code for folks who are CCAs. We do offer continuing education units for these calls. 1 hour of sustainability credit is available. And if you don't have that app, you can use the form linked in the chat or coming in the chat. We'll put the link to the CCA request form. And then I think we just have maybe a closing poll to share with all of you. It's helpful for us to get some feedback on whether you all learned anything, whether this was interesting to you, and we share this with our team and with the presenters as well to see how we're doing, if we're meeting your needs and providing interesting content and increasing understanding out there of these practices, and also how likely you are to share that information with others. So we'll give you a second to wrap up. And then I think the last slide in our deck, while you're answering that final question, we will not be doing a call in October because we're going to give time for everybody to enjoy autumn activities, and also recognizing that it's a busy harvest time for many farmers and people working in the space, but it's also a planting time too. So we wanted to just call out and wish everybody a happy planting season. So plant your cover crops, and then we'll stay tuned for ICCON to resume on November 8th. It will be the same registration link, so you're already registered for it, and we will send out like a reminder the week before with some details. We're looking at kind of maybe a series around some different data and research on cover crops. We'll maybe spend the winter looking at economics and survey data and research on cover crops. So stay tuned for that. If there's nothing else, we can wrap up. Oh yeah, Doug, sharing the November 7th field day at the University of Illinois on carbon dynamics that ICEP is also a partner on. So we'll share that information as well once it's available. But I'll wrap up again. Thank you to Tyson for sharing information, being with us, and navigating a last-minute power outage and internet loss and keeping your cool and rolling with it. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.